Good day, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Kobus, and we've got Dylan joining me today, and we're going to talk to you about productivity in the workplace. So thanks for taking the time out to join us today. So just a brief introduction when it comes to productivity. I think what we usually see is a culture of managing output. I think if we look at our organization, our business partners and our customers, it's always about the output and not really about the input. And I think if you look at a product, a good quality product that you trust, that product is basically just a result of something. And that's the result of input that was made into that product specifically. I want to make a bit of an analogy today as well. If you think about the Formula One team Mercedes, they've been winning the construction championship over the last 6 years, and there's 1,400, 1,500 people working on that car within the team. And when Lewis Hamilton wins, that's basically a result as well. So it's all about the team and the behavior year in, year out, and how that team is managing as a collective behavior, choices that they make, and then obviously the team effort as well. So it's all about the input, and obviously winning is a result. So this is something that we investigated quite a bit over the last couple of months. We've had a lot of requirements from customers asking us for tools. How can we better manage or see input, behavior, stats on behaviors, and so forth. So we evaluated the number of tools, and that's what we want to share with you today. So we're not going to be long, maybe 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to hand over to Dylan, and he'll talk us through our findings.
Thanks, Kobus. Good morning, everybody. So as Kobus mentioned, this is a tool that we've been looking at for quite some time. And basically, it is a simple tool that allows teams to understand how people are working, whether they're in office, whether they're remote, working from anywhere. Now, what I want to do is really not talk to you specifically about the tool itself, but we're going to talk about 4 different points and how the tool handles those points. So the first one is, how do we optimize operational efficiency? Second one we're going to look at is workforce analytics. Then we're going to chat about data privacy and compliance. And lastly, we're going to talk about workforce productivity. So just before we get into that, the tool that we're utilizing is a combination of a number of tools actually, but it is utilized across 7,500 customers around the globe. So we're not talking about something that has just been dreamt up and developed. It's been around for quite some time. So let's just kick off with operational efficiency. So if you look at the graphic there, I mean, how often do we have operational issues in our organization where we seem to think that it's an easy, plain sailing, roll the ball along, but it's actually a square block that we've got to move along. It takes many people and a lot of effort to actually get that process working. So some of the problems that we have, I mean, the key one for me is really the lack of relevant data. Then we have these unplanned spikes in workload, and we have legacy systems, outdated systems that we're still utilizing. We also have an ineffective baseline to measure. And that just goes to say, because we don't have the right data, our baseline is made on our gut feel or who shouts loudest and what we're hearing from the team. Misunderstood workflows. We often have a situation in our own organization where we think we understand the workflow. We sit around the boardroom table, we design it, we change it, we implement it, and it will come back to the boardroom in a couple of versions until we get it right. And it's just based on lack of understanding of how the applications and how the process actually works before we actually get it right. And it's never right the first time. And lastly, it's a lack of clear utilization of resources, whether those resources are people or applications. We find that we don't really utilize those resources correctly. So how does the tool help us with this? So there's a couple of points. So the first thing is, and I think probably the most important, is the tool provides context to the data. And the context gives you a better picture of how the work gets done. It allows us to establish an operational baseline And that baseline is a picture of what business is about and how those processes are actually functioning. It allows us to understand the employee utilization of time and make needed adjustments. And this is key here because you take an example where you have an individual who is extremely productive between the hours of 4 and 12 or 2 in the afternoon. I don't want to interfere with that productive time, but I need to, all the other tasks that I need to allocate to that employee, I want to move that into a place where he is non-productive or he's a little bit slower, and that would be in the afternoon. So each employee is different, each team is different, and the data allows you to understand that and then make the necessary changes accordingly. Uncovering root cause of spikes in workload. A simple one in a sales team is the last 2 days of the month there is an immense amount of sales effort, and the spin-off is that the finance team is now working overtime and working late and starting to make mistakes. So we understand there's a spike in workload. How do we now change that? So the tool allows us to see the data, visualize the data, and then make informed decisions of how we want to change that. And then lastly, of course, is resolving workflow bottlenecks and poor organization structures. So all of us, in all of our businesses today, we've got a whole lot of workflows and processes that we run, and they don't always work effectively. And sometimes they get old and mundane and they need to change. And you don't really understand when they need to change. You don't need to understand how you need to change your structures because you don't have the relevant data. The tool provides you with the data, allows you to make those changes. And lastly is managing of costs. And in this scenario, it's better visibility of application usage. If you look at the graphic on this slide, that's just a dashboard view of the top applications utilized in this organization. And I've broken it down into one application, and I can see which resources actually use the application and how often they use it. So dark blue being a higher usage than the light blue from that resource. So the converse is true, is to see which applications use the most, but now I can see applications that are not used and make decisions about that as well. The next thing we want to talk about is really the workforce analytics. Now, analytics, there are a couple of things that come up at the moment. And the first thing is, how do we identify the gaps in productivity? The second thing is, how do we resolve the inefficient business processes? So, we've got an inefficient business process, but what do we do about it? How do we boost collaboration across teams? Now that we have this more of a remote work from anywhere culture that's developing across the globe, how do you do that? Lack of visibility, factors driving employee turnover. So, you hire great people, but then 2 or 3 months down the line, they keep leaving the organization and we don't understand why. So the tool itself provides us with a couple of things. And I think the graphic there analyzes the whole workforce analytics side of this tool in one. Analyze, consider the future, identify the gaps, and find the solution. But in real terms, what the tool does is measure and improve productivity of individuals and teams. And the critical thing here about the measure is each one of our organizations is different. Our requirements for productivity are different. Our view of productivity is different. The tool is simple and customizable enough to actually configure it in such a way that it suits your organization to measure productivity that is important to your business requirements. We use the analytic insight created from the tool itself to drive engagement and reduce employee turnover. So as soon as you can see what's happening with your staff members, see what tools they're utilizing, see if they're overutilized or underutilized. And an example here is a simple one of a technical resource that seems to get everything done very quickly, and the help desk seems to just keep pushing more and more work their way, making them more and more busy and keeping them a lot more busy than the rest of the team, which can lead to problems inside the team. So you start understanding that the devil of the detail in the data. Using workforce data to collect it from employees, monitoring to improve process. So by understanding what your employees are doing with the tool sets that you have in your business, you can make changes to the process. There may be inefficient tools that they're utilizing and they're spending way too much time to complete the task, where we could have a better tool or a better workflow, a better process to achieve the same goal. Integrating with data analytics with external sources, and this is a very, very important factor as well. So I understand how the resources are using and the tools that are provided, but now I can integrate that, for example, into a call center. and understand physically what the call agent is doing, how long the call agent is on every call, plus all the other applications that make up their task. And I have a broader picture of exactly what's going on in that person's day. And the fact that they can only answer email 3 or 4 days later becomes a lot more clearer because of the workload that that person has on their plate. Managing and optimizing software tools. We've spoken about this in the previous slide, but tools that you aren't utilizing, you spent 100,000 Rand on a software tool, only 2 people in the organization are actually using it. The rest of the organization are using a free tool and achieving the same results that are expected from the expensive tool. So why do we need it? Understanding collaborative tools and understanding the activities across in-office and remote teams. So if you're responding to a proposal, an RFP for a customer, or writing a proposal, is the team emailing a document around, or are they using the tools that we've invested in, for example, Teams, or collaborating online with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. So it gives you the context to what's actually happening there. The third point we want to talk about is really how do you ensure data privacy and compliance? And this is a hot topic across all of our organizations, and it's only going to get more complex as we move on. So a couple of the issues that we've got at the moment, how do you manage your legal issues and regulations across geographies? Every single one of us is going to start doing business with organizations that have ties in Europe or the US, and we're going to be governed by regulations in other countries. How do we manage that? How do we ensure that data that's being collected adheres to our security and compliance policies? How do we identify employees that are not safeguarding the data correctly? What about protecting the employees' data privacy to ensure that it's not violated? What about mitigating the breach potential from outsourced or remote employees? We've got people working from anywhere, in coffee shops, at home, multiple access points back to our network. So how do we mitigate potential breaches? And that could be as simple as copying stuff onto a, almost said a floppy drive, there, gave away my aid, but onto a memory disk and moving it around, or copying it onto Google Drive or something like that. So the tool itself, how do we handle this? So firstly, we have the capability to identify patterns of mishandling of privacy data. Okay, so we can establish patterns and we can recognize those patterns and alert on those patterns. We can then use the data gathered to quickly detect and review high-risk activities. So something as simple as plugging a USB in on a certain machine, for example, somebody on the finance team plugging USB in and copying certain spreadsheets or certain documents onto the USB. That could be deemed as a high-risk activity. What about uncovering compliance and security gaps from off-site access? So somebody that's off-site and they start doing certain things on the workstation, for example, copying data into Google Drive, we could see that as being not being compliant to our security policies. Then also ensuring employee privacy with data collected. So any data that's collected on an employee, make sure that that data is also secure and handled correctly. And analyzing user activity and behavior to discover abnormalities. So if you look at the screenshot on the right, it's really a screenshot of screenshots, to put it bluntly. So in this scenario, if you look on the right there, YouTube has been deemed as unsafe, and we have the capability of taking a screenshot of that individual while they're accessing the unsafe application. We can use it for education purposes with that user, or if you need to use it for any other certain processes that you have in the business as well. So the last point we want to really talk about is how do we analyze and improve employee productivity? Now, there's a number of questions that I have to ask here. And when you look at productivity, when somebody is not productive, is it because of the amount of time spent on calls with the customer? So they're on the telephone all the time and they're not actually getting to the tasks they need to do. Are their projects completed on time, or are their projects overrunning all the time? Now, is the time spent on action items for meeting? So the team is having an immense amount of meetings, immense amount of action items, but none of them are actually productive to the business. Now, is it the number of emails? So is our team bogged down with emails that are going forth in a day? Is it the time spent in specific software applications? Is the software tool that we have to accomplish the task, is it cumbersome or is it efficient? Are all the software applications used even productive? So we've got a number of tools. Does the team use all these tools? Are they leading to a productive team. But these are just some of the questions that you need to be able to ask leading up to productivity. And the toolset itself allows us to ask those questions, store the data, and actually react upon that data. So firstly, we now understand how employees utilize their time. Okay. We also can now find the right workload balance. We can make sure that we handle our dish out tasks to different people based on their workload. We can analyze top performing behavior in the team and then create a productivity baseline that the rest of the team aspires to achieve. We use that data insight to coach employees and improve performance. What we also do is we share the productivity data with the team to drive engagement. Now, this brings me to the graphic on the slide. So this is really a dashboard, a daily team pulse dashboard, which on the top left corner there is the team member who is most productive, and then the team member who's least productive in the bottom right corner. So it is visible, the entire team has access to the data, they can see how they rank, they can see where their time is spent, and they can actually make their own changes to their own structures within the way that they conduct themselves to actually become more productive for themselves. And lastly, again, and you see this point come across all the points that I've spoken about so far, is inefficient operational workflows and poor process. You know, in the old days, we used to have process management systems, business process management systems that used to drive process management for us. But in the small to medium-sized enterprises, we can't afford those massive, big, complex systems. So this tool itself drives your operational process and workflow, but from a user perspective. So how are the users running that workflow and process and allowing you to make the changes accordingly? So this brings me to this last slide in the presentation. And what I really want to do is just highlight the productivity journey. So the way we see that is there's three elements to being productive. One is the effort that's put in, one is alignment, so aligning that effort, and then one is focus, being able to focus on the task at hand. So the question here is, how do you measure productivity and efficiency? You know, for an individual, for a team, an organization, a specific role, or remote or office workers, that's what we want to figure out. So where do we start? So what we do is we talk about observing, reporting. So we start with basic questions. You know, are the people working? Where are they working from? How long are they using applications for? How much of that time is productive? Are they spending their time on social media, or during work hours when they're working from home, they're spending more time on Netflix than they are on the tools that they need to accomplish their roles or their jobs? So that's the first step, is to actually observe, to gather the data and report on the data. The next step is now to modify behavior. Now this is, there's two parts to this. So somebody that's lying at home watching Netflix during work hours, that's quite a simple fix. Don't do it. You know, so your normal HR process, that's not what you should be doing. Please don't do that. Don't do it again. But then we have a situation where we ask the question, how much time are we spending in meetings? What's the cost of that meeting? How do we change that? How do we reduce the amount of people in the meeting? Or how do we reduce the time of the length of the meeting? Or how do we reduce the number of meetings in somebody's diary? That's a little bit more complex, and that's going to result in a little bit more thought process into achieving that goal. So there's two different ways of modifying the behavior. The one is where you're doing something wrong, which you shouldn't be doing. And the other one is where you can see what the organization is doing and you need to become more efficient, more lean, more mean. And that is specifically what we define, what we mean by modifying behavior. And the last point here is what is occurring in the passive time. So what I mean by passive time is we've got three sorts of time in anybody's diary. So the first time is you are productive, you are non-productive, and then you are passive. So a salesperson passive time could mean that they're in their car and they're driving off to a customer for a customer meeting. So I need to understand what happens in the passive time as well as what happens in the productive time. Okay, and then lastly, you know, we talk about accelerating or developing and coaching. Now I've shown you how the data is shared with the teams, which helps the teams, that just drives a gamified or that competitive nature of the team. But there's another key point here, which is context switching. So what do I mean by context switching? So let's come back to the analogy of writing a proposal for a customer, and you need to get that proposal out. So to switch off the distractions, the physical distractions, is easy. I lock myself in a boardroom and I switch my phone off. That is that side of it. But I'm working on a laptop. And what's going to keep bombarding me on the laptop? Applications like Outlook, email, Teams messages. There may be other collaboration tools, Zooms, pop-ups from your browser, etc. So all of these things are going to interfere with your thought process. And it's been proven that it takes you 10 to 15 minutes once your concentration has been broken to get back into the swing of things and start completing the task. So when you start having applications that are interfering with creating context switching, your focus is shifted, which lengthens the amount of time that you're actually going to complete the task. And the question is, are you going to complete it effectively, or are you going to make mistakes? Which is another reason why a lot of people leave those high focus tasks for early in the morning or late in the evening. Okay, we've spoken about applications that we can just continue often. The next point here is really, are we improving? And this is a continuous cycle of continuous improvement. So you're always reporting, you're always modifying behavior, and you're always developing to be better. And the last and most important point of this whole tool set is identifying those resources at risk of burnout. Are we overloading certain individuals that can't say no? And are there other individuals which we could utilize better, that could share that workload of that person? So with that, guys, I know we promised that it was going to be a short and sweet presentation. We're at the end of the presentation. I know you guys have got questions and you're going to fire some questions for us to answer. And if you do want to see a little bit more about the product, we do have a 14-day trial that we can install for you. It's pretty quick and easy to install, and spend an hour and a half with you to show you how you can customize it for your organization, and you can start observing your productivity journey within a couple of minutes, to be honest with you. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the presentation, and I hope it was insightful, and hopefully you've got some questions for us.
Maybe just one point on Dylan's presentation there. So I almost got a fight when he showed the little pictures there. I sort of my laptop over here, and those pictures being taken from my webcam. So that's not the case. So that's a screenshot. So if certain conditions are met, and you can obviously select those conditions. If you meet those conditions, it can take a screenshot of the screen. And let's say it might be sensitive data that user might be on a banking application or something like that. You can limit the information and filter information that will be captured on that screenshot. So you can classify sensitive information as well. So it's at least not your webcam, it's at least just a screenshot of the screen itself. So when it comes to the questions, let me just have a look. Dylan, will you be able to see how much time an employee or group of users are spending on a specific application itself?
Great question. So the short answer is yes. And the more complex answer here is you can set up multiple rules for different applications. So certain applications you want to know when the employees spend more than 10 minutes on, while other applications you want to know when they spend more than 1 minute on. So you can do it for applications, you can do it for websites. Pretty much any subroutine that runs within an application can also be configured that you can see what's happening. And I'll come back to a simple example we use with the call center environment. So using a help desk tool, let's just call it ZenWorks as a help desk tool, and the agent logs into ZenWorks, we can integrate into the back end of ZenWorks, and that'll allow me to see each and every call and how much time the agent spends on opening the call, updating the call, closing the call, answering emails, closing emails, and get a holistic view of all the applications in that process.
Good, thank you. And I think our last question, do you need to install software on all the machines to be able to report on them?
Yes, so this is agent-based, so it is functioning on Windows and Apple. So you can remotely deploy it to your users as part of your normal rollout structures that you do to your organization. And it's a small agent that resides on the machine, and the configuration is done in the back end from a console.
That's it.
No more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We are getting into the habit of doing these once a month. Hopefully you can join us next month for the next one. And have a great day. We'll catch up with you later. That's for now.
Thank you all.